Welcome to our Regulation Mastery session. In this session, we will continue reading the CSSF Circular 22-806 from Part 1 Outsourcing Arrangements, Chapter 4. Governance of Outsourcing Arrangements. Section 4.2.8 Supervisory Conditions for Outsourcing. 59. An in-scope entity that intends to outsource a critical or important function shall notify in advance its plans to the competent authority using the instructions and, where available, the forms on the CSSF website. Such a notification is to be submitted at least 3 months before the planned outsourcing comes into effect. When resorting to a Luxembourg support PFS, governed by Articles 29-1 to 29-6 LFS, this notice period is reduced to 1 month. Any planned outsourcing arrangement, which has not been notified within the above notification period or without using the instructions, and where applicable, the forms available on the CSSF website will be considered as not notified. 60. The notification is without prejudice to the supervisory measures, or the application of binding measures and/or administrative sanctions, which the competent authority might take as part of its ongoing supervision, where it appears that these outsourcing projects do not comply with the applicable legal and regulatory framework. In any event, in-scope entities remain fully responsible to comply with all the relevant laws and regulations as regards the planned outsourcing projects. 61. Should credit institutions or payment institutions outsource functions of banking activities or payment services to a service provider located in Luxembourg or another member state, to an extent that the performance of that function would require authorization or registration where such activities would be carried out in Luxembourg, such an outsourcing shall take place only if one of the following conditions is met. A. The service provider is authorized or registered by a relevant competent authority in that member state to perform such banking activities or payment services, or B. The service provider is otherwise allowed to carry out those banking activities or payment services in accordance with the relevant national legal framework. 62. Should credit institutions or payment institutions outsource functions of banking activities or payment services to a service provider located in a third country, to an extent that the performance of that function would require authorization or registration where such activities would be carried out in Luxembourg, such an outsourcing shall take place only if the following conditions are met. A. The service provider is authorized or registered to provide that banking activity or payment service in the third country and is supervised by a relevant competent authority in that third country, referred to as a supervisory authority, and B. There is an appropriate cooperation agreement, e.g. in the form of a Memorandum of Understanding or College Agreement, between the competent authority and the supervisory authorities responsible for the supervision of the service provider. In-scope entities shall contact the CSSF in the early planning stages of their planned outsourcing arrangement to ascertain that cooperation arrangements between the CSSF and the third country supervisory authority or can be put in place. 63. For the purposes of points 61 and 62, the outsourcing of functions of banking activities to an extent that the performance of that function would require authorization or registration where such activities would be carried out in Luxembourg shall apply in the event where a credit institution intends to proceed to the outsourcing of a material proportion of the activity that consists in the taking of deposits and other repayable funds from the public. 64. the outsourcing to a service provider located in Luxembourg that relates to services subject to an authorization requirement in accordance with Articles 29-1 to 29-6 LFS shall take place only if one of the following conditions is met. A. The service provider is authorized by the CSSF in accordance with Articles 29-1 to 29-6 LFS to provide such services, or B. The service provider is otherwise allowed to carry out those services, i.e. it is a credit institution, or it is an entity falling under the scope of Article 1-1(2) C. LFS, that is part of the group to which the in-scope entity belongs and which exclusively deals with group transactions.